How's going guys, welcome to the channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto went to heaven and got Harem in there? Part 2. Huge shout out to NeonZangetsu for this story. If you wants to see awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get into the video. Extermination Day. Extermination Day. Naruto stumbled through the empty halls, words ringing in his head like a bell as he staggered along. He could still hear them. Over and over. Louder and louder. Every word, every soul, every syllable etched into his head with painstakingly clarity, a haunting tale he'd never be able to forget. The very theory of Extermination Day sounded terrible enough on paper, but the explanation that followed the words Luke told him proved so much worse. Even now they haunted him. Once a year. Exorcist angels. Descending to hell and killing every soul in sight. The full 24 hours of pain and torture and torment and death. Senseless slaughter. Sickening savagery. Spiteful slaying. He wasn't satisfied with just her word, of course. People lied all the time. Even angels. For all he knew, heaven had a way of getting past his negative emotion sensing or some such. This place was already affecting him in some ways, who knew what else it might do. And so he had demanded. More questions of her, until he knew everything, not just the yearly exterminations, but Adam's part in them, and the one who ordered it all. In hindsight, he really shouldn't have pried. Ignorance was bliss, something he should have clung to. It wasn't possible anymore, because now he knew the truth, and the truth had set him free. The worst part about it all. Lute was telling the truth. At the end of the day, Adam's second-in-command genuinely believed she was doing good by committing genocide. In her twisted soul she thought this was her duty, that all those who dwelt below heaven deserved to die. Unacceptable. Oh, he knew Lute was trying to play him in other ways, make no mistake. Telling him this wasn't just for the sole purpose of inflicting pain, she probably sought to spur him into action, egging him on in the hope that he would fly off the handle again and do something foolish. Oh, yes. He knew. But it didn't change the facts. Lute's voice taunted him even now. The next extermination is in 6 months. Can you live with that knowledge? She was right. He couldn't. Unacceptable. He'd been on the warpath ever since. The first step was Lute herself. He knocked that smug fish out, tied her down, and locked her up. The second step came in the form of the exorcists. It took less than an hour to gather all of Adam's followers together under the pretense of a meeting. From there, he asked them what they thought of Extermination Day. Their answers had proven enlightening. Of the 100 exorcists currently on active duty, only 4 girls expressed anything less than complete and utter devotion to Adam's cause. The rest gleefully looked forward to the next E-Day as they called it. Some were even keen on moving up the timetable to twice a year at that. 4 voices of dissent. Amongst 100. Those 4, he excused, idly resolving to ask their names at a later date. As to the rest. Diplomacy failed. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't disappointed in them. Or himself, for what he did next. In the end, he did what he did best. He beat his enemies half to death, gave them a stern talking to, and strung them in the square for all of heaven to see until they changed their minds. Broken bones, mangled muscles, warped wings, you name it, he did it. They wouldn't recover for months, if not longer. Which gave him more time to plan his next move. The third step proved a bit more cowardly on his part. In that it involved him staunchly and absolutely avoiding Emily until he got this settled and sorted. He didn't think he could face her as he was now. Hopefully she wasn't a part of this. She couldn't be, right? She mustn't be. But if she was. No, don't think about that. As for the fourth and final step. That awaited him here and no. His legs had carried him to his final destination. Good. To his credit, Naruto didn't hesitate for long. A quick breath to marshal his anger. Nothing more. Alright. Steeling himself, he reared back, raised his right leg and. His shoe met door with an awful crunch. The latter yielded. Loudly. Sarah. The head seraphim jolted to her feet from behind her desk with a stricken look on her face, gasping as the door to her office crashed open, all but tearing free from its hinges. He knew how he must appear to her, face carved from stone, all traces of light and levity gone, concealed behind a stern mask of anger. Gone was his one sunny smile, in its place stood a stern scowl bordering on an outright sneer. His once blue eyes burned a molten shade of gold, warping the very air around him. Was she angry at him? Was she afraid? Was she going to try and talk him around? Too bad. He already knew his answer. Tough. Naruto. Sarah forced a smile to her face, when in truth, he could see she very much wanted to fly away. You've been busy, I see. To what do I owe the pleasure of your company? Funny you should mention that. He stalked forward and planted a hand on her desk. I have been busy. Because little birdie just told me about a fascinating holiday we have up here. Her shoulders drooped a little. And what holiday is that? Extermination Day. Sarah's smile died an ugly death as her wings slammed down behind her. Not good. As he looked on, she drew herself upright, looming large over him, silvery eyes blazing into his gold. Naruto lifted his chin and bristled in return, ready to defend himself should she attack. Would it come to a fight? He wasn't certain. Could he win? Maybe. Sarah was clearly a cut above Adam, but then again, he didn't rightly know how powerful he'd become himself since his death. His body felt so damn powerful right now, but she could easily be his match for all he knew. In any case, he wouldn't be the one to throw the first punch. Not here. Was that Lute's plan? Piss him off, make him kickstart a fight with Sarah, then get him kicked out of heaven. Clever girl. Something ugly curdled in his chest. It almost felt like respect. Were he alive, he might have fallen for it. Sarah sighed suddenly, drawing his attention back to her. You are, quite possibly, the most exasperating angel I've ever met. Thanks. It wasn't a compliment. She sank back into her seat with a huff. Please, won't you sit? He crossed both arms before his chest, wings twitching at his back. I'll stand, if it's all the same to you. Very well. Who told you of this? Lute? No, don't answer. She waved him down before he could get a word in edgewise. Of course she did. That girl seems determined to make you fall. His brow furrowed in momentary confusion. Fall. Sarah looked away, unable to meet his gaze. It is the fate of an angel who does disreputable things. No, no, no. He wasn't letting her wriggle out of this. You mean like Adam? Oh, wait. He snapped his fingers. He hasn't fallen, has he? So why would I for asking about Extermination Day? Sarah pinched the bridge of nose, closed her eyes and heaved a long suffering sigh. Why must you be this way? Questioning everything, upsetting the natural order of things. It's not like me to leave things be if something's wrong. It's human nature. You're not human. She sprang to her feet, tiara glowing, wings flaring as she shouted at him, distress bleeding through her facade at long last. Neither of us are. We command legions, possess powers that would make mortals quake, and with great power comes great responsibility. We must be better than those who have come before us. Silence stretched between them, fit to strange them both. Naruto stood his ground. Answer my questions and we can be. Did you sanction this? He didn't hate Sarah, but he wasn't exactly her biggest fan right now, either. Her response here hinged on how he would treat her in the future. And so he waited. Not until she looked away. Something cracked deep in his chest at that. It felt like his soul. You did, didn't you? All those people. Sarah glanced at him out the corner of her eye. Hell was in open revolt. We have no choice. Flimsy argument remained flimsy. Last I checked, there wasn't an army at our gates, so someone's lying. He tilted his head and made a shushing noise when she tried to interrupt. Tell me, who exactly told you hell was up in arms in the first place? Sarah tried but subsequently failed to hit or wince. Adam. Right. He thumbed his chin. And I'm guessing he was all for this extermination of yours. Sarah bit her lip. Did you ever go down there yourself to confirm his words? The silence was her answer. You allow Extermination Day to happen and you've never been down there in person. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. I'm sorry, you wanna run that shit by me again? Otherwise. All of heaven dimmed around him anew, more than ever before. The guy might get the wrong idea, you know. Fury bubbled up in him, not a wrenching rage as one might expect, but something altogether colder. Oh, he was still angry, downright livid, but it was a far cry from the seething tempest Adam had unwittingly ignited in his idiocy. This was different. Cold. Arctic. Glacial. For a moment, just a moment, it felt like his very soul was frozen solid, a sliver of ice, such was the frigid fury within. A small, rational part of him mused, I think this place might be affecting my emotions. He took a deep breath and let it go, releasing it now in a plume of frigid steam. Alright, he exhaled softly. I've had enough. Then he moved. His right hand settled on Sarah's desk and ripped it aside, casting it into wall with a sonorous crash. She recoiled, but he had no pity left in his heart to be moved by such a sound. He didn't miss a beat and waded through the mess it made, finger jabbing forward in accusation like some glowing dagger. Sarah shrank back from it as much as him. What are you doing? Naruto pressed his advantage, even as anger festered in his chest. You're killing countless souls on the off chance they might revolt again, tarring them all with the same brush. Can't say I agree with that. Hell is full of monsters and madmen. Can't you see why I'm doing this? The older seraphim flung out an arm to ward him off, or perhaps she feared an attack, he wasn't sure which. I've got people to protect. Souls I can't neglect. So I'm not taking chances here. Her brow furrowed when he didn't budge. Make no mistake, if you make one wrong move, you're done for. Enough. His wings flared, cutting her off with a rush of wind. In the silence that followed, no one dared breathe. Not until he took the initiative. Me, you've made your one wrong move. He shouted over her, voice rising to stifle her shout as much as the momentary gale he'd summoned. Now you're done for. His finger drilled in, jabbing her ribs, causing her to retreat with a yelp. I will be the one to prove that you're done for. Not even a prayer's gonna save you now, cause you're done for. You better not run, or soon those wings will be done for. Sarah glared back at him, defiant, unrepentant, chin jutting out furiously, a myriad mess of eyes glowing in her hair as she snapped back. These souls are like my children, I must protect them at all costs. Up came her hand between her breasts, eyes blazing. The last time I failed in my duty, heaven faced a heavy loss. I just want to protect my people with this fragile peace we have. Still better to save than to stab. She rolled her eyes and scoffed. I do what is required. He sucked in a sharp breath, offended. To think that Emily admired you. That took the wind right out of her sails, for Sarah made a pained noise of panic. You mustn't tell her about this. Huh. Her panic was all too real, Emily might not be a part of Sarah's scheme after all. He filed her reaction away for later. Mustn't I? He snapped back, feigning ignorance instead. Are we done with our little rhyme session now? Or were we singing? This is no laughing matter. No laughing matter. Her words were admirable, but misguided, no, foolish, even. Couldn't she see what she was doing here? Naruto shook his head. I think it's laughable that you're confusing peace with quiet. No matter how hard you try, the rest of heaven will find out. You've gotten lucky so far, but this isn't the kind of secret that can last forever. People will find out about this. A guilty conscience, loose lips or a redeemed soul, it doesn't matter how long it takes because it will happen. The head seraphim squinted at him. What are you proposing? He scoffed at her, stamping down on his anger. They're gonna find out sooner or later, all you can do is make sure they can understand. Without turning them into zealots. You need to tell them yourself before they find out on their own. In the meantime, I'm going down there. Sarah blinked. Down where? He smirked. Where do you think? She balked. You want to visit hell, are you mad? Naruto winked. Wait. Emily cornered him before he could make his escape. Perhaps escape wasn't the right word, no, Naruto knew it wasn't, if only because he wasn't trying to run away from anything. Heaven had little power over him, and Sarah even less, but even so, he couldn't quite quell the sudden urge to flee when he heard her voice. It wasn't a command or a demand, nor an exclamation, but something so much worse. Pleading. Begging him to stop at the edge of the clouds, to just wait a moment, take a step back, and reconsider his actions. Damn it, he wasn't even looking Emily's way, and already he felt weak. He'd been trying to avoid her with good reason. Since his bitter argument with Sarah. Everything would be so much simpler if he just went down for a little while and found the truth on his own. Maybe then he'd have a better perspective on this purge madness, maybe then it would all make sense, maybe. Bah, who was he kidding? Life, especially the afterlife, was seldom so simple. Emily reached his side a moment later and took a hold of his hand tightly. Where are you going? Lifting his chin, he clenched both fists at his side and reaffirmed his resolve. Down. She looked to him with her guileless lilac eyes, still clinging onto him. Why? The things he could say. Sarah's words came back to him unbidden. Please, don't tell Emily. A brief surge of righteous anger bloomed in his gut and scowling, he stomped it down. This was probably going to blow up in his face, he just knew it. Even so, he didn't have the heart to do it, to be the one to take her innocence and smash it. He simply couldn't bring himself to corrupt this pure girl. He knew she was no child despite her slight appearance, but even so, he wanted to protect her from the awful truth. Learning about the purge, no matter how necessary or unnecessary it might be, had broken something deep inside him. Harem would have had something wise and sage to say about this, he was sure of it. He would have given him good advice, and maybe, just maybe, with his help, he might have made it through. And yet Kurama was gone, the lack of his presence was a hole in his heart, gnawing and twisting and biting until he felt hollow inside. But he absolutely refused to take that anger out on Emily. So he passed the buck instead. Reasons? He made a point of looking away. They're not mine to tell. Go and ask Sarah about them if you like. Her gaze narrowed. Did she say something to you? Naruto mimed the action of zipping his lips. Emily stomped her foot, but he held firm. Yes. Deflection successful. Not his problem anymore. He'd kept his end of the bargain, Emily could ferret out the truth of her own accord, and Sarah couldn't cast a crime at his feet. Better yet, he wouldn't be around for the inevitable explosion and blame game. That followed. Perhaps that was cowardly of him, but he didn't want this pure little seraphim to think ill of him. She squeezed his hand, suddenly diverting his attention. You're going down there, aren't you? I should accompany you. Naruto nearly choked on his own spit. No. Bad idea. All the bad ideas. You can't. He crouched down, the better to avoid towering over her, looking her in the eye. Hell's no place for someone of your stature. Emily yanked her hand from his, crossed both arms over her chest, and glared at him. Because I'm a child. Save him from stubborn girls. For the love of. Carefully, he reached out and reclaimed her left hand in his right. No one is calling you a child, you know. She tried to glare at him, but managed only an adorable pout. You're acting like I'm one. I ain't. He rasped a little laugh despite himself, only to laugh harder when she kicked his shin. Really, I'm not. This is just something I have to do on my own. That was the truth of it, had to find his answers alone, one way or another. Unbiased. Only then would he know peace. He knew he had Emily when her fingers threaded through his own. Will you come back? His head bobbed. Soon as I can. Promise? He held up his free hand and wiggled his pinky finger at her. Oh, you. Emily seized it in her own with small giggle, curling her little finger tight, but that wasn't enough for her. She darted in under his arms and gave him a hug, burying her head in his chest as her small arms struggled to wrap around his broad back. Be safe. Naruto froze up for what felt like an eternity, uncertain as to how he should react. How long had it been since someone hugged him? Emily made the choice for him and squeezed him tighter. Hug me back. The flicker of his old self broke through and he returned it, planting his chin on her shoulder. I'll be right, alright, don't worry. She drew back to regard him with damp, shimmering eyes. Promise me you won't become a fallen. Naruto hesitated. Promise me. Mistaking his silence for anxiety, Emily latched onto both his hands this time in desperation and held tighter to him. I can't bear the thought of it. Frankly, he wasn't sure he could become a fallen. Call it a hunch, call it a feeling, but he felt like he was on the right path. Besides, if his awful argument against Sarah and the laws of heaven hadn't seen him cast out, he wasn't sure what could. Even his so-called descent was just him popping down to check out the underworld for himself. Maybe he was missing something here, maybe not. In the end, there was only one way to find out. Right, everything would be fine. He had to tell himself that. Else, he might lose what little sanity he possessed. And so, he blew out a breathy sigh, hoping he could honor the words he was about to say. I promise. Something softened in Emily's face. Good. She darted forward and took flight. This time he was keenly aware of her kissing his forehead this time, rather than his cheek. The act was pure as the driven snow, chaste, even. His face burned all the same. That was twice now. Once was an accident, twice was coincidence, thrice. Well, there hadn't been 3 times yet, but this. It felt like. Something, you know. She leaned in and whispered quickly into his ear. If you're looking for the person in charge, you should go to the angelic embassy. Ask for an audience with. The rest of her words were inaudible, only to him. His eyes widened ever so slightly. Oh, thanks. He turned, but the little seraphim was already long gone, wheeling away into the heavens. He could have caught her if he wanted to, but something told him she wouldn't much appreciate that. No, best to let her go for now. They could sort this whatever it may be upon his return. Alright, then. He walked to the edge of the clouds and steeled himself. If there really was something down there he couldn't see it, there was too much light and the clouds were thicker than any fog he'd seen. And yet he knew where to go. How hard could this be? Just fly straight down at top speed, land, have a look about, ask a few questions and go back up once he was satisfied. Surely it wouldn't take more than a day, 3 at most. Everything would be fine, what could possibly go wrong? I just jinxed myself, didn't I? Nah, he didn't believe in that sort of thing. He tucked in all 10 of his wings against his back, took a deep breath, stepped off the edge and. Banzai. Reality trembled. Contorted. Twisted. Resisted. Something shattered. And then he was through. Carmine heard the explosion from on high because someone had torn open the sky. Bracing a window, she flung it open just in time to see all hell break loose. Of course it had to be on her damn turf, didn't it? The lone angel soared down through its speed. And plowed clean through a nearby building. Another now. Another. Yet another. That can't be good. Alistair looked up from his balcony as a distant explosion rattled the world. He knew that noise, it was the sound of change, knocking on his door. And so he observed really as a star fell from heaven. That glorious glimpse of gold of light rocketed down from the on high to the ground at absurd speed, careening through everything in its path, heedless of the carnage it caused. This wasn't another one of heaven's purges, far from it, this was something new, something unexpected. What fun. Rising to his feet, the radio demon tittered merrily. Well, this promises to be entertaining. He wondered if the hotel's newest guest had noticed it as well. He squinted at the falling star from afar. He was many things, but not blind. He recognized that energy. He smiled at it. He knew. Naruto. Negativity. It assailed Naruto at every angle, so much so that he had to close his eyes against it and seal off his sixth sense for a moment lest he vomit outright. Unfortunately, that moment cost him dearly. The sheer assault on his senses actually knocked him out for a moment, not long, barely a second, but it physically threw off his descent, what had once been a relatively controlled flight immediately became an uncontrolled tumble that sent him crashing through a building. Followed by another. Then another. Another. Vaguely he was aware of shouts and screams of alarm, but momentum dragged him on relentlessly as he hollered apologies. Wham. What the hell? Sorry. Blam. My leg. Sorry. Slam. That was my favorite table, asshole. Sorry. By the time he finally regained control it was too late, he slammed down into the street on bent knee, the sheer shockwave of which rattled his bones and had his wings tucking and tight against his back. From there, he sucked in a quick ragged breath and climbed back to his feet, reeling a little. Okay, didn't stick the landing. This had to be the place, yet this so-called hell didn't look anything like what he thought it would be. From there, getting his bearings proved to be an exercise in futility. Although he could see burning buildings aplenty and plenty of red sky, he had no idea where he'd landed. Really could have used Kurama's advice right about now. Alas, he had only the void. Shunting open his senses, he winced at the ensuing negativity, but it wasn't such a shock to him anymore. Appalling, yes. Shocking. Very much so. But he found himself gradually growing used to it, that little lapse from before wouldn't be enough to knock him out again. But this place was wrong. Wrong, terribly and horribly wrong. All twisted emotions and greed and anger and lust woven together in a crippling detail that threatened to cripple him with a migraine. And the smell. Good lord, the smell. He didn't even have words for it. Another burst of negativity assailed him, sending him staggering into a wall. He grit his teeth against the pain that followed, clamping one hand to the side of his head to stave it off, to no avail. It was enough to drown a man, he could barely keep his head above water. How did people live here? Sarah's words came back to him, sad and resigned. You will find no goodness there. No. There must be some good here. There had to be. He refused to believe all this was for nothing. Holy shit. A new voice had him craning his head. Seemed someone had noticed his impromptu landing, and they stood not a yard away. Bold red eyes gleamed at him, set within a round bright pink skin face bearing long pale hair gone almost white, a pair of equally pink horns jutting up from her head. Come to think of it, the rest of her looked pretty pink at that. Like a bright hot pink. And were those wings jutting from her back? And a tail. He shook his head once and squinted at the newcomer anew, only to realize the scantily clad outfit she was wearing, and good lord she had legs for days. No Naruto. Bad Naruto. Focus. Thankfully, she seemed to be eyeing him up just as hard. She'd stopped short. Did a double take, now. Hello, handsome. Where did you come from? His wings flared behind him almost of their own accord, bathing her in angelic light. That answer your question? The horned woman's gaze flitted up and bulged as she beheld them, alongside his halo. Oh, shit. She recoiled and retreated, stumbling over herself. You're Anne. Hey. Wait. He grabbed at her wrist, drawing her back before she could bolt. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to talk. No way, nah. She hissed and clawed at his chest, breaking her nails. Tell that to the buildings, Buster. He reeled her in, butting his head against hers. That was an accident. Her tail lashed at his face like a whip. He caught it and yanked. Much to his surprise, the winged woman moaned. Naruto tilted his head, baffled. Did you just? Her face flushed deeply. You didn't hear shit. Pretty sure I heard a what was that for? She'd stomped on his foot. He glared at the feisty horned woman, and she glared right back at him, breast smashed up against his chest, heaving for air, lips inches from his own. Tension hung hot and thick between them, and he suddenly found himself stricken by a strange urge to something he really shouldn't. I'm sorry, I think we both got off on the wrong foot here. Tentatively, he released her tail and, still holding her, drew back at arm's length. Why don't we start with our names? Ha. That's rich. She snapped sharp teeth at him in a snarl, forcing him to draw back or be bitten. You first, angel asshole. For a moment there, he saw red. Cheeky minx. She was doing a fine job provoking him. Naruto. He said his name for her sake as much as his. And you are. Barasaka Mayday. She supplied warily. So what now? You gonna kill me? Her fangs flashed as she snarled at him. Add my name to your tally. Do angels have those? I'm gonna let you go. Her jaw clicked open. Angel boy, say what now? I said I'm letting you go. When she scowled at him, he hastened to amend his statement. Once I ask you a few questions, you're free to leave. Baraskia scowled at him. What's the catch? Want me to get a head start before you cut me down? He shook his head slowly, bangs swaying side to side. Nope. Her scowl redoubled. Not gonna stab me in the back. Why would I even? Because that's what you angels do. She stomped a heeled foot on his again and thrust her face into his, either trying to harm or scare him, for what little good it did. Adam brings you shits down here every year to hunt us like it's a damn game. You gettin' an early start this year. Adam? Here at last a smile touched his face. I'm nothing like that guy. I beat him black and blue. Ha! She barked a laugh, despite her derision, it was a strangely pleasant sound. Prove it. It's the truth. He shrugged a shoulder. You'll just have to take my word for it. The word of an angel. She scoffed, leaning back. Why in the hell should I believe you? An idea dawned. Or I could show you. Show me why I. Her words peaked into a gasp as he pressed a hand to her forehead, planted his fingers over her eyes and shoved his chakra into her, showing her the memory in question, the moment of Adam's defeat in all its painful glory. A string of varied swears and syllables followed her curse, actually understood a few of them before she reclaimed her voice again, and when she did speak, it was little more than a weak whine. Okay. She writhed in his grasp, gasping aloud. I give. Whatever you're doing, stoop. He released her, leaving her to crumple bonelessly to her knees before him. She swayed where he'd left her, eyes half-lidded. At length, there he focused. What in the hell was that? He could have explained it any number of ways. He settled for the truth. A memory. What kin to memory rattles the inside of someone's skull? Sorry, did that hurt? There you go apologizing again. Her tail flicked as she squinted up at him, still on her guard. You're really not gonna kill me? He held up his hand. Scout's honor. She smacked her lips at him. Yeah, gonna have to better than that. You angelic types ain't big on honor. Adam really had carved an awful reputation down here, hadn't he? Alright, miss. I promise I won't hurt you. And if you have any idea who I am, you'd know that I never go back on my word. Something about his conviction must have finally got through to the surly succubuser, because she slumped with a sigh. Miss, huh? Verosika rasped a laugh. Shit, you're the real deal, aren't you? You're nothing like Adam at all. Naruto blew out a sigh. I did tell you. You really did, didn't you? Huh. Her tail flicked once more as she tried to rise and failed before, crumpling back to the ground. Good on you. Bastard offed one of my besties last year. Hope he's down and out for good. A beat of silence passed between them as she looked him up and down anew, considering something else, now. You know, I've never done it with an angel before. He frowned. Done what? Verosika blinked, incredulous. You cannot be serious. Naruto returned her blink with two of his own. Pretty sure I am. Hells, you actually are. The succubus licked her lips. Aren't you adorable? Such was the beginning of a rather spectacular day. Too much negativity. Naruto grimaced against it with every step he took, it was like a miasma down here and it was all he could do not to choke on the air itself. He isolated his sixth sense and warded himself against it as best he could, but it still lingered at the edge of his senses like some sly snake trying to wriggle its way into his mind. Lies and riddles. Fallacies and falsehoods. There was so much darkness down here, so much pain and fury and hate that it made the angel in him want to lash out. To summon a weapon to his hand and… No. He wouldn't give Sarah the satisfaction. She wasn't right. Couldn't be. Unacceptable. Just the thought of her and Lute laughing at him was enough to solidify his resolve. And so he steeled himself against his doubts and walked on. It was a lot to take in, but he at least had some small semblance of what he wanted to do where he wanted to go. Ask his questions, get to the angelic embassy, figure out what was going on. Sounded simple on paper, no. Verosika wasn't simple. She was a talker, he'd come to realize that quickly enough, but she was also a looker, more than that, a toucher. More than once her shoulder bumped into him, her hip brushing against his with nearly every other step. It baffled him to no end. Only a few minutes ago she'd been kicking and screaming to get away from and yes, while he was grateful she'd taken him for his word, he had no idea why she was getting so touchy-feely all of a sudden. What was she up to? In the end, all he could do was walk forward, listening with half an ear as Verosika babbled on. So are angels like, sensitive to negativity, or something? Nope. He took a brief breath to steady himself and mustered a winning smile. Just me. The succubus hummed once, pleased by his admission. Good to know. Naruto frowned down at her. What was that? Nothing. She looked away quickly. HRRRMMM. Her tail was swaying awfully close to his leg. He brushed it away, only to earn a startled yelp from the young woman. Hey. No touchy. The blonde brow rose in mild consternation, but he refused to rise to her bait. You're the one who's been touching me. Nothing wrong with a little window shopping. She looked him up and down. You're no blitzo. Boo. X. She crossed both arms before her bountiful bosom and smacked her lips, producing an audible pop. With a capital X. If I never see that imp again, it'll be too soon. Another migraine rattled his temples, forcing him to close down his senses once more. Barasaka saw it. But he'd just be glad you didn't land on the wrath ring. You wouldn't last a day. He shot her a baleful look, to which the horned woman shrugged her shoulders. Just saying. You really don't know much about this place, do ya, Whiskers? Please don't call me that. Barasaka grinned. She did, in fact, call him that. On that less than pleasant note, he returned his attention his surroundings. This place wasn't anything like he'd expected it to be, he thought there would be a lot more. Fire and brimstone, you know. He could feel countless eyes watching from the shadows, not doubt intimidated by his holy presence and wings alike. Even if Barasaka wasn't, he might want to do something about that. Ducking into a nearby alley, he dragged Barasaka with him into the shadows, heedless of her yelp. Somewhere between one sputtering protest and another as she spooned against him, he pressed both hands together. A brief plume of smoke and the transformation jutsu was done. It didn't do anything for his newfound height, but it did help to hide his accessories. When he emerged, he looked much as he had in his old life, much to her surprise. Barasaka balked. You can change your appearance. Just like that. Yup. She licked her lips. Mama likes. Most angels can't pull off that kinda hat trick. He beamed. I'm not most angels. Clearly. The silence held between them, but only for a moment. So you angels can't die, right? Skirting around a pothole in the street, he shook his head. Thought I was supposed to be the one asking questions, you know. But it's true, isn't it? She skipped ahead of him to slow him down, weapons don't work on you. Bloody immortal. One good stab from those angelic weapons of yours and we die. But you bastards can't be killed. Much to his chagrin she hands clasped behind her back and leaned forward as she began walking backward, granting him a glorious glimpse of her assets before he thought to drag his eyes upward. Isn't that so? Naruto stubbornly averted his gaze. It's not something I've tested. Barasaka noticed his stiffness and winked. See something you like, big boy? No. Spinning about, she began walking ahead of him, craning her to expose the slender expanse of her neck. You sure? Yes. He grunted. And here I thought angels weren't supposed to lie, ow. She yelped as he thumped her over the head, right between the horns. Okay. No need to get kinky, geez. He honestly didn't know what to make of this so-called demon. She seemed to delight in teasing him, but when he actually touched she folded faster than a house of cards. She was far from pure but he'd seen and sensed far worse both in his life and afterlife. Maybe the underworld was something of a mixed bag. Kurama would have called it wishful thinking. I mean, it's a joke, right? What you were saying earlier. Don't get me wrong, he came back to himself just in time to catch the tail end of her conversation. You're easy on the eyes, but redemption. For people like us. Nah. She crossed both arms before her face in the shape of an X. Don't bother. Don't even try. There are some messed up people down here. I'm not even the worst of them, can't even hold a candle overlords or the sins. They're crazy. An explosion rattled the world behind them. Naruto looked back with a low whistle, watching a plume of smoke rise into the distance. Like that. Yeah, like that. He could hear shouts and gunfire in the distance, he pivoted towards the noise, looking to help. Don't bother. Versoika caught him by the wrist and in a rare moment of restraint, he allowed it. It's just another gang war. I mean technically we're on. Abruptly, her face drained of color. Naruto noticed. What? We need to go. She yanked his arm and started running. Now. Right freaking now. He tore his arm from hers, keeping pace easily enough. Why? She tossed a glare over her shoulder. This is Carmela Carmine's turf and you wrecked a bunch of her buildings. Did you forget about the disguise? She only ran faster. I also might have done some stuff to piss her off. What did you do? Slept with one of her daughters. A bead of sweat ran down his brow. Maybe you ought to apologize about that. No. Do not mess with her. You may be an angel, but she will absolutely destroy my ass. The blonde brow rose at that image. Might want to watch the wording there, miss. Oh, so you get that reference, but not me coming onto you. Everything clicked into place. You were coming onto me? You cannot be serious. They sprinted round the corner and came face to face with a wall of lead. More aptly a number of gangsters holding a great deal of guns, each of which unloaded on them the second they were in range. Barasaka spat a curse. Ah, shy. Naruto dropped the disguise, grabbed his new companion by the waist and yanked her inward. All 10 of his wings went up and the bullets went down, spattering harmlessly against the impromptu shield he'd raised. Barasaka had been right. This didn't even tickle. He looked down at her, framed in the shadow of his wings. you good? Why yeah, she trembled as she choked the word out. Thanks. Almost bit the bullet there. Annoyed by her joke as much those firing upon him, he swept one wing outward in a flash of golden light. Bullets ricocheted. Men and women dropped like flies. Crap biscuits. Hadn't meant to do that. Someone screamed. Angel. Another skirted around him and lunged in at his flank with a shriek, trying to slam a knife into his back as bullets pinged harmlessly off his raised wings. It was a very nice attack. They had impeccable timing if nothing else. Shame it was utterly doomed to fail. Naruto pivoted, caught the madman's fist in his palm, knife and all, then yanked with the intent of yanking his attacker off the ground and brandishing him as a hostage to stop the gunfire. He succeeded. Albeit not at all in the way he'd intended. Much to his chagrin, their limb tore off in his grasp at the shoulder with a wet sucking sound. Naruto balked. Verasika gagged, one hand flying to her mouth to stifle her gorge at the grisly sight. His attacker howled in agony. Gaia. You shit. I needed that. Oops. He blanched. Didn't realize you were so fragile. The poor gangster reeled on their feet, green skin gone greener still. Can I have my arm back? He thumped them over the head with it and knocked him out. No. Rounding on the remainder, he raised his right hand. Stop, all of you. At that command, the gangsters, mobsters, hitmen, whatever, he didn't much care for titles at the moment, parted as someone stalked through. He took the newcomer in at a glance. Glowing white eyes set against sinister scarlet sclera, tapering off into dark wicked lashes. Her skin was dusky as ash, her long white hair streaked with a touch of darkness, bound back into two wicked spikes atop her head. He wondered what it looked like when she let it down her outfit, likewise a mad blend between black and white. Right down to the strange leggings she wore. No, wait, those weren't leggings at all. The strange wrappings around her legs hummed to his senses, almost distractingly so. Envoy of heaven. She spoke the word stiffly, almost coldly. Why are you here? We're not due for another purge yet. I'm not here for a fight, he lowered his arms. Your boys started this. Then why are you here? No matter how he said this, he was going to sound like an idiot, wasn't he? Would you believe me if I said happiness and redemption? Her brow furrowed. No. Verasika ducked. Shit, that's Carmilla Carmine. Hello Verasika. How nice to see you again. The overlord smile said otherwise. I'll deal with you shortly. Her piercing eyes swept back to him. If you haven't any business here, then I'll have to ask you to leave. He stepped forward instead. I can't let you take her. Mirda Descarada, the lady overlord, muttered something in a different language he didn't wholly understand at first. It didn't sound terribly flattering. That girl is nothing but trouble. What do you want with her? Well, he clasped both hands behind his head, she's kin to my guide. Carmilla squinted. She squinted hard. Guide. He winced in return. It's a long story. She glowered at him. Recognition dawned. I have no desire to fight you. Great. But neither can I let you pass after what you've done. She looked to her fallen fellows. You blasted through 3 of my buildings, killed 3 of my men, maimed another, and now you're sheltering that little puta over there. Verasika waved sheepishly. Sorry, I'm with tall bride and handsome. Naruto blew out a breath and looked Carmine's way. Lady, if I wanted to seriously hurt anyone, I would have. The pale brow rose. Right, okay. He held up both hands before she could explode. But regardless. It wasn't intentional. They started this. She planted a hand on her hip, beeping her body towards him. The same could be said of you when you came crashing down from the heavens. He blanched anew, shame curdling in his gust. And I'm sorry about that, really, I am. But I can't exactly let you detain me here. Or her. In truth, he could have flown away. Would have been easy. But that wouldn't be fun, and he had no desire to make another enemy so soon after landing here. Tell you what, let's fight for her. Carmilla scoffed. You jest. Nope. He retorted. Nothing fancy. You and me. Right here, right now. No weapons or tricks, our fists and feet. I can't hurt you. Liar. He sensed the falsehood in the air, but didn't call her on it. Knock me down and I'll submit to you. He sketched a bow. I won't even use my wings. Verasika made an indignant noise in the background. Hey. Do I not get a say in this? They both rounded on her. No, you do not. Not very well, Carmine conceded, surprising him. But when I win this paltry contest of yours, and I will win, you will leave this place in peace and never return. Sure, and when I win, you let us leave. An idea dawned, and he smacked his fist down atop an open palm. And you'll be my friend. How's that sound? Not childish. She replied. Are you certain you're an angel? Naruto tucked his wings tight between his shoulders in response. Are you sure you're a demon? Credit where it was due, the overlord wasted no time, rather than rise to his retort, she stepped forward, warding one arm before herself. He matched her. And nearly lost his head as her heel swept in. She's a kicker. Instinct had him ducking with a laugh, delighted by her dexterity. The moment he gave ground she was on him in a graceful pirouette, striking high for his face with 3 quick sweeps of her legs. She had speed, he'd give her that. He dodged them all, hands hung loose at his sides as he continued to yield the field. Carmilla didn't retort to that effect, she simply scowled and sashayed forward. What's wrong? Fight back. This time he caught her ankle, right where her leg wrappings were thickest. His hand stung and her scowl became a small, secretive smile. So that was it. Angelic steel. Recoiling, he released her and took a kick to the chest for his troubles. She didn't use her hands to fight, not once, because didn't need to, she was poetry in motion, flowing like water. He couldn't find the right word. Until he did. Dance. This was a dance. Perhaps the finest he'd ever known. Dodging, swaying, weaving, they wove around one another, trading blows as they went. He could have crushed her 7 different ways to Sunday, but he didn't want to. She was all smoothness and grace, right in his face. At his height, she couldn't touch him. Even now with him actively handicapping himself, she didn't come close to the most fearsome foes he'd fought. And yet. His blood began to sing. But fun, what fun, such fun. Another light laugh escaped him as they continued their wild waltz, flowing around rubble with Ursat's skill. Carmine clicked her tongue as he slapped another of her kicks aside. Does this amuse you? Why wouldn't it? This is fun. Fun? She faltered for a moment and he took full advantage, hammering a spin kick into his ribs, drawing a pained gasp from her lips. I hadn't thought you the sort. She struck the ground hands first and pivoted her entire body to sweep low for his feet, forcing him to lift his left leg and block her. Carmine's smile said he'd made a mistake. The moment he did, she dropped down on all fours and somehow flowed around him to lash out at his last leg. Cute. He hopped into the air and slammed his feet into her face, sending her shooting across the street and into a building. Not a heartbeat later she was up and at him. He spied the burnt-out wreck of a car nearby and kicked it at her, only for her to divert it easily with both hands, first time she'd bothered to use them in this fight, and fly at him again. Her heel struck for his spleen and he retaliated by thrusting an open palm against her collarbone. A mere fourth of his usual force blasted her backwards, yet as she flew she caught a telephone pole with one leg, swung herself around, and used her own momentum to launch herself at him anew. Her right leg soared up and came crashing down in an axe kick, forcing him to block with crossed arms overhead. Carmine hit hard, harder than he'd expected. He grinned up at her from the shadow of his interlocked limbs, eyes gleaming a glowing gold as rubble rose into the air. Her sparkling silver eyes seared down into him with a hint of challenge, the smallest of smiles tugging at her lips, imparting a singular demand upon him. Try harder. But all that power had to go somewhere. In a word. Got down. With an ominous crock of sound, the street splintered underfoot, forcing them apart. Picking of a tumbling shard of rubble, he spied her silhouette in the haze of dust that followed and struck low, hammering a fist into where he knew her stomach would be. A gasp of pain was his reward as the smoke cleared and she took a tumble to get away from him. He gave chase and focused on her further as they dueled, narrowing his senses upon her nearly to the exclusion of all else, the better to ignore his migraine. What he found there impressed him, she fought viciously but with dignity, there was an elegance to it, refinement one might not expect from a denizen of the underworld. Carmine wasn't good, but she wasn't entirely bad either. She possessed a steely resolve rivaled only by a few, more than that, he could sense a deep and abiding love for her daughters, she had more than one. And a steely determination to protect them above all else. And there, beneath it all, a deep and all-encompassing loneliness. She'd sacrificed so much for them. Even her own happiness. You're a good mom, ain't ya? Her brow furrowed. How do you know that? Oops. Belatedly he realized he'd inadvertently spoken the words aloud. He'd pried too far, delved too deep. He pulled back and she took full advantage, falling upon him in a storm of blows. A foot caught him in the face, not harming him, but pushing him back all the same. Let's call it an angel thing. She growled and attacked him again, their world dissolving into a whirling dervish of destruction. He wasn't sure how much time passed. Didn't even care, really. He could have ended the fight multiple times, but each time he found himself passing up the finished blow. He was wearing her down, he knew, but he couldn't bring himself to administer that final strike. This was fun. Entertaining, even. He didn't want it to end. And then someone ruined it. One of Carmine's men saw an opportunity and took it, a stray bullet whistled his way and on a whim, he deflected it with one hand. It hit Carmine. Or rather, the cloth holding up her hair. Gravity did the rest, those pale tresses collapsed under their own weight and cascaded down her back in a rush of black and white. Carmilla rounded on them, hair flaring around her. Deja de despair. Stop shooting. Naruto paused, the thrill of battle finally leaving him. You look nice with your hair down. A spot of high color turned her pale face red. Your compliment is unnecessary. I won that duel, clearly. Ah. He rounded on her, incredulous. In what universe? In this one, pendejo. He didn't need no translation for that. I had you on the ropes. She huffed a laugh. You were right where I wanted you. Yeah, kicking your ass. Ah, Carmilla tossed her head back and ran a hand through her long hair. I seem to recall hitting you several times. Naruto barked a laugh and butted his head against hers. And I seem to recall knocking you through a building. Is that so? Her silver eyes narrowed to near, feral slits as she leered up at him. You seem to have a poor memory, boy. Perhaps we should go again. He growled at her, eyes aglow. Fine by me. She hissed back. Best 2 out of 3. Winner take all. Oh, for crying out loud. A familiar voice interjected before either of them could make good on that statement. Get a room. Naruto jolted with a blink, and just like that, the spell between them broke. Carmine rounded on Verosika, redder than ever before. Impudent girl. And that was his cue. Exit stage left. Make like a banana and split. He didn't dare wait to see what else Carmine might say. I guess we're done here. Been fun, let's try it again, B. Quickly, he stepped back, grabbed Verosika by the waist, and spread his wings wide. Her eyes bulged. Which wait way. Naruto never heard the rest. They took flight. Chapter end. Alright, that's it for today's video, guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Peace out.